Hey, what's happening? I'm here. I'm back. And I'm running a little behind tonight because I've been busy working on content for the show. And guess what? You're the recipient of that content. Even though it's a little bit late, I'm late for you. Yes, I am. I am late for you. What's going on, everybody? Robert Phoenix. I'm back in the, feels like, I just spent the last 4 days on the Texas coast. And this place feels like Kansas here now. It's because I live, I got a cornfield across from me, for crying out loud. Although it's not growing yet, but it will soon. They will plant that corn soon. So I've gone from the rolling surf of the Texas Gulf to the rolling hills of the Texas Hill Country. It's a very interesting 4 days. Spent the Virgo full moon there. There was a night. What day was that? Friday? Is it Friday? I was grinding a little bit on Friday. I was definitely grinding a little bit. I did my Friday live show from the beach house where my son was holed up with 9 other Gen Z lads having the time of their lives, I can tell, on spring break. I don't think they left much tread on the tire. Let's put it that way. And they were great kids. They were totally great kids. They managed to, I think, be a little wild and rambunctious, which is what you're supposed to do when you're that age, believe it or not, and responsible. Go figure. Now, I haven't had a call from the owner of the Airbnb and knock on fake wood. Hopefully I won't. Although it was a little weird for the first couple nights. The first couple nights I got calls. That was weird. So the first, what was it? It was, are you coming over here? Oh, look who's here. The Astro Cat is back. Yeah, here you are, Mr. Astro Cat. Here you are. Oh yeah. Yeah. You happen to be back on the air? Rosie was pissed at me. She wouldn't come out and greet me. She was pissed because I was gone for 4 days. Cats hold grudges like that. Yeah, they do. I know they hold grudges. So yeah. So when was it? When did I get the first call? I think it was Thursday. It was Thursday day. I got a text, and apparently there was some kind of fight going on in the alley next to the house or on the side of the whatever. But it wasn't them. It wasn't like my kid and his crew. It was somebody else. But the woman who is the head of the homeowners association lives catty corner from where my kid and his buddies were staying. And I was there, but I wasn't in the house. I was down the street, maybe about an eighth of a mile at the most, maybe a quarter mile at the most. It could be a quarter mile, very close. So I got a text the next day, and of course, nobody there at his place is texting me about what happened. So now I've got to figure out. Okay, so now I'm talking to the guy who's the property manager, not the owner, and I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell I didn't, I didn't really want to say, hey, I'm not there. I'm down the street, right? Because I don't think it would have been too big of a violation because I think he knew that there was, a spring break thing going on. But I was there to, be the default parent. So, yeah, I know you weren't there, were you? I didn't see any cats there, by the way. There's a lot of dogs. No beach cats. So yeah, it's kind of awkward. You're like, oh yeah, well, let me find out. It's new to me, right? And then I call my kid, and he's, oh yeah, there were these dudes, and they were fighting over alcohol, and yeah, they weren't with us. So then I go back to this guy, and I tell him it had nothing to do with us. So then I guess it was Friday night. about 12:30 in the morning. I was asleep, and my phone starts ringing, and it's ringing, and it's ringing, and it was, first of all, I'm in a different place, so I was discombobulated, and I thought, is this my fucking alarm, or because sometimes my phone sounds like the alarm. You shouldn't really have your phone sounding like your alarm. I think that's probably bad, because when something like that happens, you don't know whether it's your phone or your alarm. That's exactly what was happening. So I was discombobulated. What the fuck time is it? Am I up? It's like, well, it's 12:30. I'm like, oh shit. And I pick up the phone, and it's the property manager dude. And he starts talking to me, and I'm kind of out of it. And so I have to, kind of front that, oh yeah, oh right, yeah, I'll take care of it. So apparently what happened was some girls came over to their place at about midnight. They're teens, right? It's spring break. And they parked in front of their, the house that they were staying in. Now, it was not, they have a fire hydrant there, but it was not in front of the fire hydrant. But big brother across the street, they're in the fire lane. They're in the fire lane. So she calls the woman who owns the house, not the property manager, the woman. The woman is getting the phone calls, and the property manager is calling me. So then I'm getting the text from the woman who owns the home, and I'm getting a call from the property manager. And then I gotta sound like I know what I'm doing, and I'm actually there. I'm trying my best. And I was a little annoyed, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. So I go over there the next day. This is to do my show on Friday, and I pull in to that area in front of the place. Now, I thought that the person had pulled in front of the fire hydrant, but they didn't, because there's a fire hydrant right next to them, right next to that house. I pulled up in front of the fire hydrant. So I did that. And then I decided to go across the street to talk to the person who I thought was the head of the HOA. And I knock on the door, and this guy answers, but he's not. He's just staying there. And he tells me, yeah, you should, apparently they give you tickets if you park in front of the house. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So I took my car and I went around the corner, and I came back, and I'm getting ready for the show. And there's a knock on the door, and it's the property manager. So I just happened to be there, which was great. That's number one. And number two, I just moved my car. So it was like, okay, this is a proof of life moment, and a proof that there was no car there. And after that, all the, petty bullshit went away after that. It was kind of an interest. It was like, what it was like? It was a fucking Virgo full moon. That's what it was like. It was like a Virgo full moon. And I'll bet you that the old biddy across the street, who was part of that HOA, the head of the HOA, I bet you she was a Virgo, or had a Virgo moon, or Venus in Virgo, or something. Because, man, the Virgo vibes were coming in hot. They were coming in hot during that 24-hour period, basically from Wednesday night to Friday night. So yeah, Wednesday, Thursday, 48-hour. That 48-hour period, man, those Virgo vibes were just banging on this Virgo. Let me tell you, it was like, enough of this shit. Enough of this Virgo moon shit. I'm done with it. Okay, I got a Libra moon here. I don't do well with this. Although the guy was pretty polite, he was pretty cool, and we settled it up. By the time I showed up and was in the house and had moved my car, the Libra moon was kicking in. Let me tell you, it was like, okay, smooth, it's graceful, we got this, right? So yeah, my parents have Virgo moons, by the way. They both have Virgo moons. And my mother was born on a Virgo full moon, and my father was born on a Virgo new moon. He was a Leo, but his moon is really early. So it's just right in that zone where it's not quite in that crescent phase, right? It's still kind of new, but it hasn't gone to the Shiva moon. So I grew up with two people that had very intense Virgo moons. They're both different phases. One was new and one was full, and I got the brunt of it. It's like, please. And you see this with we're going to talk about intergenerational astrology tonight, and I've stumbled on a really interesting series of generational trends, and I'm going to talk about them tonight. So we're going to spend a lot of time with that. We're going to look at the chart of the moment as well, because that'll be I think we need to. I think I skipped it last week. Yes, I skipped it last week, and I think we need to pay attention to it this week. So we'll look at what's going on astrologically. There's just so much weird shit happening in the world. Very, very weird stuff. Strange stuff. We might talk a little bit about Leah Thomas, William Thomas, Leah Thomas, whatever. I was looking at his name today, and Leah was in William. And what's really interesting about that whole thing is there's another swimmer in the Ivy League, which is where Leah Thomas is swimming. And she's transitioning from a female to a male. So she's getting testosterone. And I'm not sure she medaled or not, but apparently earlier in the year, she beat Leah Thomas in a 50-meter sprint. So she's getting the benefits of testosterone. And she's a woman, and she's still competing with women. Okay, so not that long ago, when I was a kid, that was kind of a big deal. Like, that was East Germany during the Olympics. When I remember these swimmers from East Germany, they fucking look like linebackers. I'm like, are you sure those are women? I mean, it was, I was 12 years old, so I'm a little confused at what I'm looking at. Although, was she a swimmer or diver? Her name was Ulrika Knopp. I'll never forget that name. I seem to remember that she was somewhat attractive. Ulrika Knopp. There she is. She's still around. She was a diver. I remember her being attractive. Ulrika Knopp. Was she from Sweden? She was Swedish. Oh, no wonder. Yeah, she was attractive. She still is attractive. There's a good looking woman here, Ulrika Knopp. Yeah, 1972 Olympics, the freeboard. Although she does have a bit of a strong jaw, I do have to say. Now that I'm looking at it, she's got that. Look a little like Leah Thomas here, actually. I think she's a woman. I'd like to think she's a woman. Although, geez, now that I'm looking at her, this is dude-like. Here's a picture with her and Abraham Lincoln. Let me show you this. There's Ulrika Knopp. We should have a little diving card. And there's Abraham Lincoln in the background. This must have been taken from Tartaria or something. This was her in Tartaria. She's an immortal. This is her now. She's got a bit of a strong jaw, I have to say. What do we got here? Oh boy, I don't know. Yeah. I was 12. What can I say? I was easily deceived. Is that her daughter? Who is this person? Whatever happened to Ulrika Knopp? She get married? Did she have kids? What's her story? Let's find out. Let's see. Children. Anne Lindbergh. She's a Taurus, and she's 66. She was born in Gothenburg. So this is her daughter. Okay. Former Swedish diver. All right. It's a little like mom there. A little thick around that neck. She has a partner. Her spouse was Who was her spouse? Is it this guy? He's a Swedish hockey player. Looks like Joe Rogan. A little bit there. Anyway, that was her spouse. Now she has a partner. That's very European, isn't it? She has a partner now. Kaye Steen. Who's her partner? It's Matthias. Well, she likes the hockey players. I'm assuming she's a chicklet. Oh, that's Woody Harrelson. Look at that. You know, the world really just has like about 10 different people, max. Everybody else is just kind of a mold. That's the Woody Harrelson archetype, the Woody Harrelson mold. Anyway, Ulrika, I don't know. Go back here a little bit. So what about her personal life? Now I'm a little obsessed with her. Let's see. She's married to fellow diver Mats Lindberg. Their daughter, Anna Lindberg, competed in diving. Maybe she's just got some heavy tea. She looks a little softer here, right? A little bit. A little softer. But those East German women, they were intense. But you know, we used to I want to get out of this. How do I get out of here now? There, let's do that. Yeah, she looks a little softer there, right? Wonder how much that vintage rookie Eureka Nap trading card is worth. Oh, I bet you it's big bucks. So there she is. Her daughter does look like her. That's her husband, Mats. He's so proud of her. They're both divers. Anyway, you want to see what the East German swimmers used to look like? And by the way, once they found out that they were taking anabolic steroids and probably testosterone too, right? Because testosterone, I guess, technically could be a steroid, but there are other things that are steroids. It's not just testosterone. There's also human growth hormone. There's a cocktail of things that you can take. So let's look at these East German swimmers. All right, look at them. 1972. See if we get any pictures of them. These women were like, here we go. See, look at this. Cornelia Ender. That's right. She was doing the juice. Look at this. That's an Australian. Cornelia Ender had packed on a lot of muscle. All right, let me see if we can find a good picture of these East German swimmers. Shirley Babashoff. A lot of these women are big. Really big. Who's this? Oh, they've got all, it's Cornelia Ender. I think is this Cornelia Ender? Yeah, this is her. Look at the arms on her. Holy shit. She was the great East German swimmer. Look at the arms on her. These women were big. And they were taking juice. They were juicing. And California wanted to rescind her medal. Right there. Look at that. California Senate urges governing bodies to rescind medals won by East Germans during state-sponsored doping scheme. Boy, the times have changed, haven't they? Inside the games. When was this? 2016? Senate Resolution 88 urges the relevant governing bodies, such as the IOC, FINA, and USA Swimming, to recognize those who are denied their chance of glory by doped East Germans. Well, isn't, in a lot of ways, Leah Thomas naturally doped because of the testosterone, the building, and even at the testosterone level that Leah Thomas has, it's still probably greater than the testosterone level that the women he's competing against have. Plus, he has all the musculature that he built. So just, what was this, 4 years ago? No, 6 years ago. God. Hey, look, Liam, which is kind of Leah, it's part of William, right? That's interesting. 6 years ago, they're clamoring. There's Shirley Babashoff. She's looking rather glum and depressed. That was in Montreal. Here's the East German. Look at that. The jaw on that East German. Anyway, they wanted these medals back. It's like, fuck you. You guys cheated. You were taking performance-enhancing drugs. That was, I think, around the time. Was that when? I think it was before they went through that whole steroid thing came about when Obama became president. And I think that was, by the way, I think that was intentional on Obama's part. I'll do a show on all the stuff that Obama, not tonight though. I'll do a show on all the stuff that Obama did just to wreck American institutions. I'll do that at some point. And the whole baseball thing was one of them. The steroid fiasco. Who do you think was behind that? It was the attorney general. It was Obama's attorney general. And who else did they go after? They went after Lance Armstrong. So they were going after all these male athletes and all relating to dope and doping. And eventually they went after the NFL with the whole concussion thing. There was a lot of things that were being deconstructed during the Obama era. I don't want to get into it right now. Yeah, that's right. 2016, that's interesting because the tide is turning a little bit. Trump is banging his war drum. There's change in the air. So they wanted to get those medals back. So this other person who's a woman is getting testosterone. What's her name? Isaac something? Let me find out. Let's see. Here it is. Isaac Swimmer Trans. So back on the 8th, Leah Thomas was defeated by a fellow transgender swimmer, Isaac Hennig, male transgender, who is transitioning with hormones. So Isaac is a she that goes by he, and Leah Thomas is a he that goes by she, and they're in the same conference. Now, Isaac is originally from California, Palo Alto, Menlo Atherton High School, and swims for Yale. And Leah Thomas is from Austin, specifically Westlake. So that's strange, right? Leah Thomas defeated by Isaac Hennig at freestyle. So I think that's an interesting. Okay, so the cynical part of me wants to know whether or not that they threw that race. So look at the build. This is Isaac right here. That's Isaac. There they are. And what's interesting is we have Venus and Mars in Aquarius, which is strangely strangely transsexual. When you get Venus and Mars together, just in general, it's masculine and feminine, and like Greta Thunberg has that Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio, and she's feminine. She's a girl, but she looks like a guy. I'm sorry, Greta Thunberg kind of looks like a guy. You have Kyle Rittenhouse, born on the same day as Greta Thunberg, who is a guy that looks like a girl. So I think Kyle Rittenhouse and Greta Thunberg are twin flames. By the way, somebody asked me about twin flames in last week's show, and I'll put that information in the show. Yeah, comments for last week's show. And also, I got a lot of heat for saying Jen Psaki was a shrimp. And you know what? I was wrong. Jen Psaki is 5'5". 5'5". She's not a shrimp. She was just next to a bunch of really tall people. So I take that back. I'm not heightist. And if you took me to task over Jen Psaki, you were right. She's taller than what I thought she was. So Isaac's a little beefy there. Am I right? I'd say so. They're there together. And here's Isaac here again. You think the testosterone's kicking in? Oh, I think so. I think that testosterone's kicking in. But you see, back in the 1972 Olympics, back in the 1976 Olympics, 1980 Olympics, I guess all the way up to what, the 1988 Olympics, these Germans were doping up, and you could get disqualified for that. But now it's okay, as long as you're transitioning. If you're transitioning, you can take the juice. And it is interesting. This past weekend we've been having this Venus-Mars conjunction in Aquarius, which is all flippy floppy. But Isaac, for all intents and purposes, should be swimming with the men. I mean, just to make this whole thing fair, let Isaac swim with the men. Although it's not going to happen. I think Isaac might be a senior. But what are they going to do with Olympic competition? What is the next Olympics? The last one was weird. Let's just see what the next Olympics are. Olympics. What is the next Olympics and where is it? Let's see. Summer Olympics. Summer Olympics 2024. Well, that should be interesting. It's going to be in Paris. Stade de France. Stade de France. So 2024, let's see. I think Leah Thomas is, 22, I think. 22 years old. 24, young enough to compete. Young enough to compete as a woman in the Olympics. And maybe this Isaac Hensig is going to be young enough to compete as a woman in the Olympics. And of course, it's the French, so they'll be fine with it. No problem. No problem. Oh, your buddy wants in. He wants in now. He got in last time when I was gone. Yeah, go tell him he can't come in. So apparently, Mr. Outdoor Cat got in while I was gone. Went through that little door, which I left slightly open because I pulled the power cord through there so I can sit on the porch. Left it slightly open. He got in here. And that's why Rosie was pissed when I got back, because he'd come in, he was eating their food. And these two, I don't know what they must have like a cat version of white guilt or something, because they just let this cat eat their food. It's a class thing. All right, let's check in with you. Let's see what's going on with you guys. What is happening? Let's see. Who do we have here tonight? There she is, right up front, the lovely and talented one, Joan S. We got WC Ray here, DJ MC, Michael Sisterino, Jana Veal. Hi, Jana. Miss Nikki. Hello, Miss Nikki. Sony's in the house. Love Light Energetics. Garrett Brooks checking in. There's my man, Tom Jordan. You got the wrench. There's Ryan. You know what, Ryan? I'm going to make you a mod. Can I make you a mod? I guess I have to do this beforehand. Why can't I make you a mod? Oh, I know why. I know why, because I'm on the wrong channel. But I'm going to make Ryan a mod. Let's see. My channel. Here we go. We're live. There's Ryan. Yes, I heard that. Okay. Where's the old chat? Where's the old chatteroo? I'm inducting new deputies tonight. Ryan, I've just pinned you with a badge. Let's see. Bliss Lee's here. Hi, Bliss. Here's my man Benito, whimsical farm girl. Jan Augenstein, why are we going to nationwide daylight savings time? They've only done that in past wartime. Good point, Jan. It throws off our circadian rhythm. Yep, sure does. Isn't that part of it? You have the Venus-Mars conjunction, Susie. Oh, people that Venus-Mars conjunction have a very unusual charisma. Very unusual charisma. Just ask Jeffrey Epstein, who had the Venus and Mars conjunction in Aquarius. Let's see. Wendy Eater. What's going on, Wendy? Daniel M. The experimental elemental. Really? Greta's middle name is Tintin? Are you serious? That's a dude. That's a boy, right? Oh, that's a giveaway. Neo. Hello, Neo. Kelly B. But you're still a shrimp. I've been doing, I was taking the task. I'm apologizing. This is my apology moment. You won't see that often. Let's see. What else? Who else? Beth Berry's here. The Virgo full moon. Yes. Hi, Carol. Good to see you. April. Hello, April. April Himmel. There's Charles Mazak. Tattoo Fantasy Island. That's a shrimp. Charles, you spelled shrimp the way that my grandmother used to say shrimp. Shrimp. Is that a Southern thing? But Charles, you're from Buffalo. You might have been in Mississippi for too long. My grandmother used to say shrimp. Let's see. I won't tell you what my grandmother used to call blacks. It was halfway between the N word and the Negro word. It was kind of cringy. It was kind of, you have to understand, my grandmother's from Louisiana and she was born a long time ago and she's not even here anymore. Leah Thomas says she's a trans lesbian. He's still banging chicks. That's right. As soon as he's done swimming, he'll decide not to transition. Leah Thomas, I've been trying to look up his birth date. It's very hard. There is a William Thomas, his age, in Austin, but I don't think it's the same person because they're a chef in Buca de Beppo. And unless this guy's got multiple lives, I don't think that's him. Yeah, you can see that coming a mile away. The dude is just. Did you ever watch that show, The White Shadow? There is a character on there named Salami. I don't think it was the Vincent Van Patten character. Who played Salami on The White Shadow? He's playing Salami. That's what he's doing. He's playing Salami as the swimmer. Okay, Salami, White Shadow. Oh, I think Salami was played by Vincent Van Patten. Hold on now. It was. Oh, it was Tim Van Patten. One of the Van Pattens. It was not Vincent. It was Tim Van Patten. He was Salami. That's why I knew it wasn't Vincent. Timothy Van Patten played Salami. White Shadow was great. Ooh, Salami has see, this is what I'm talking about here. Salami had an affair on the white shadow, Salami's affair. Salami is struggling in history, and that's threatening to get him suspended from the team. His teacher, an attractive lady of about 30, tutors him, but the tutorial session leads to an unexpected and inappropriate affair. See, he's playing Salami. I'll show you right here. He was playing Salami, and then she was playing with Salami. There it is, right there. You remember Mary Kay Letourneau? Remember her? And how she had an affair with her student, who she eventually married him after she went to jail. This is kind of at the beginning of that phase. Who plays the teacher? Thomas Carter. Who's Thomas? Is that the guy who played Wolf? Was that who's Thomas Carter? Yeah, he was a director producer known for Coach Carter. Born in Austin, Texas, 1953. How about that? So he cut his teeth on Salami. Okay, who's the woman? It's not Joan Pringle. Thomas Carter is James Hayward, credit only. Kevin Hooks, good actor. I've always liked Kevin Hooks. Of course, you have the great Ken Howard as the coach. There's the white shadow. Look at Tim Van Patten with a lot less hair. Who played the woman? Let's see. Series co-star Thomas Carter, who directed Salami's affair, did not appear with his character, noted as being sick with mononucleosis. What's that about? So this was a Mary Tyler Moore enterprise. Sound mix is mono. So the sound mix had mono too. What? Recently viewed. Wow. Those are the people that I've recently viewed. Who's that woman with the big boobs? She was with somebody. Who is she? Missy Martinez. She was somebody's, whose girlfriend is she? Anyway, I looked her up. She was somebody's girlfriend. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Byron Stewart played Coolidge. All right. We've had enough of that. We've had enough Salami. Okay. Let's get into the show, shall we? Because there are people that will find this show and it's like, when the fuck is he going to talk about astrology? It's happening now. I mean it. Okay. Who do we have here? Let's see. Where are we going? Let's do the chart of the moment. Because I didn't do that last week. We got to catch up with where things are, which are weird. Weird and getting weirder. Where are we? Let's modify this data. I'm not sure I care about the daylight savings time thing, but it seems absolutely random. I think we did it also when we were in that energy crisis, right? Back in the 70s. Didn't Jimmy Carter do that? Well, we're going to see, that was my Bill Clinton. My Bill. Jimmy Carter's like this. Jimmy Carter's more like we have to save energy. So therefore we're going to go to daylight savings time full time. And by doing so, we're going to be able to save hundreds of thousands of kilowatts of energy. And in America, we innovate. I was a peanut farmer, and then I went to a nuclear submarine. You can do that too in America. Bill Clinton would be like, gee, why don't we do that daylight savings time all the time? We got lots of money. We got lots of money in our account, don't we, Hillary? We can save a lot. A little crooked there at the end. Anyway, all right. Yeah, but Jimmy Carter wasn't too bad. Although it was sort of slipping into a little Muhammad Ali there for a second. Okay. Let's look at the chart of the moment. See, I was distracting you until I got to the real stuff. Okay. The chart at the moment. Oh, whose birthday is it today? Oh, we're in Aries season. All you Aries out there, happy birthday. Happy birthday, Aries. We're going to talk about the movie Love Story tonight. And Love Story actually has an Aries theme, an Aries sentiment, and an Aries saying in it. And it's a famous one. It's called Being in Love is Never Having to Say You're Sorry. Aries have taken that as their life maxim. I love Aries. It's a sign that doesn't often admit it's wrong, nor does it say it's sorry or apologizes very often. When you get an apology from an Aries, write it down. Seldom happens. They're not really here to apologize. Go hang out with the Libra. They'll give you an apology within the first 30 seconds you meet them. Oh, I'm sorry. My hair is just not right. I'm sorry. I've been running late today. You'll hear the love with Libras, by the way. See, I can bang on any sign. I can bang on Virgos too. A Virgo will apologize, but they don't like it. The Virgo will apologize. They don't like, because Virgos don't really like being wrong. It's not about being wrong for an Aries, by the way. They just don't. It's really not in their celestial lexicon. They're just moving on to the next experience. And it's in some way, shape, or form, or fashion, they have confidence in their choices, and they have confidence in the manifestation of the experience based on their choices. So rarely do they ever look back. Rarely do they ever have regret. And you won't often get a sorry. And it's not because they don't want to be wrong. They're just moving on, and they're so assured of their rightness based on action, not thought even. Virgos don't like it, because if they have to apologize or say they're sorry, that means that they're wrong. And it cracks their, their whatever, their semi, their semi-grounded facade of being together. See, I can crack on Virgos. But when a Virgo does say they're sorry, they mean it. They really mean it. So who do we have today, birthday-wise? It's March 21st. We got Rosie O'Donnell, Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil. I knew he was an Aries. Rosie O'Donnell comes across like an Aries, doesn't she? She's an Aries. You can tell. Gary Oldman was an Aries. My man, Ayrton Senna. His birthday's tomorrow. Amazing. God, I should look at his chart again. Who else? Kevin Federline, Mr. Britney Spears, Aries. Ronaldinho, the soccer player, Aries. Anybody else? Interesting. Is that a cat out there? What is going on here with these cats? Hold on a second. Something's going on outside. I think I know what's going on there. I'm hearing this cat meow, cry. Hold on. Who's out here? So get out of here. You need to leave. You need to go. Come on, go. Split. Come on, you got a home to go to. Go. Go. He's hassling you, isn't he? God. I swear to God, this cat, he's not a feral cat. He lives in this house that's on the other side of where I live. He's becoming a demon. I'm a little concerned. I mean, I feel like some kind of malevolent force has infiltrated this cat. There's a story around the cat I don't really want to tell because of the implications it might have. And the thing is, he was big and now he's getting bigger. It's like he's like two cats now. And he's defiant. I go out there and he's got like this fuck you attitude to me. Now, I had to psychically move that cat. Anyway, his name is Pippin. And he always comes over here to eat. Now, I know for a fact he gets fed very well where he lives. So I call him Double Dippin' Pippin. I should call him Triple Dippin' Pippin. Sorry about that. It was getting a little weird. Okay, anybody else tomorrow with some interesting birthdays? Anybody? Oh, Scott Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's kid. He's an Aries. Clint Eastwood, as you know, is a Gemini. The late, great Eddie Money, also known as Eddie Mahoney, former cop, right? Became a singer. Baby, hold on to me. Started singing in 1970. The group was the Grapes of Wrath. His career really didn't skyrocket until let's take a look at his chart. Let's take a look at Eddie Money's chart. Let's get into some visuals. So there he is. I used to see him in the Bay Area. We'd have these big festival shows called the Day in the Green, and Eddie Money would always play the Day in the Greens. So I saw him open for the Rolling Stones. I saw him open for Led Zeppelin. I've seen him twice. The only two times I saw him at those two shows. He's not from the Bay Area, but he was a cop at one point, wasn't he? So this is a skinny Wikipedia page. I mean, you would think that somebody with Eddie Money's, cachet, that he'd have a better Wikipedia page. I mean, it doesn't say anything about, look, this is like criminal. It's criminal. Okay, so American music composer whose first band was the 1970 group, the Grapes of Wrath. His career didn't really skyrocket until he joined a group entitled The Rockets. Money had success in the 1970s and 80s with a string of top 40 songs and platinum albums, as well as touring during some years for 10 months at a time. Money married his wife, Lori Harris, in 1989. They had 5 children. Zachary, Jessica, Joseph, Julian, and Desmond, being a product of the Berkeley street scene. He was arrested in 1959 for marijuana possession. So he was born in New York. On 24 August 2019, Money, a longtime smoker, revealed he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer. He died from the disease at his home in Los Angeles on 13 September 2019 at age 70. But come on, this guy deserves a better Wikipedia page. Maybe it's not. No, I'm sorry. This is the Astro Data Bank page. Let's see your chart, brother. Come on. It's not Wikipedia. Who's Wikipedia? I'm sure it's better. Okay. So we got a birth time here. And there he is. Look at that. Sun, Mars, Aries, driven. He was totally driven. He could be temperamental, this dude. Moon in Capricorn, a little repressed emotionally. Right? That's Moon in Capricorn. It's got stoicism. This dude is rebellious. Look at that. He's a rebel. He's a rock and roll rebel. Sun, Mars, square Uranus. And he's got a Sun, Venus conjunction. Venus is in Pisces. He had some romantic, like Baby Hold On to Me. That's a romantic song, isn't it? Whatever will be, will be. The future is ours to see. baby. Hold on. We got 2 tickets to paradise. Pack your bags with me tonight. That is a fucking Sun, Mars conjunction in Aries. Let's go, baby. I'm taking you to paradise tonight. Oh, really? How many days do I have to dress for? How many days do I have to pack for? You're dressed for paradise right now. Let me tell you. He's got 2 tickets to paradise. Yeah. So he did that song with Darlene Love. So Pisces tends to be the romantic sign, the sign that's connected to poetry and music and feelings, right? And he's got this Venus Jupiter sextile. Look at that. Jupiter in sextile with Sun, Mars. That's money, Eddie. That's money right there. That's a money angle. He's driven. I mean, you get into Sun Mars conjunction and he's got his true node in Aries. Look at that, 10th house. And the 10 months traveling, touring, I could see that with the Sun Mars 9th house conjunction. Interesting chart. Cancer rising, emotional, family guy, 5 kids. Cancerian. Even with Neptune in the 4th house, which can be a bit challenging. It's like growing up in a home with no boundaries. Got that Neptune-Pluto sextile. We're going to get into Neptune-Pluto tonight. We're headed there. That's our destination. I'm going to take you to Neptune and Pluto tonight. I'm going to show you the significance with the relation between the two intergenerationally. What else do we have here? In conjunct Saturn. Mars, Sun, in conjunct Saturn. A challenging relationship with the father, for sure, and authority, without a doubt. Interesting chart. A Moon, Saturn trine. So emotions tend to get better as he gets older. Moon, Saturn trine. And, I think this is a guy that has some principle, some character, even though he's got these really strong T-squares, could be pretty, I think, to some degree, tempestuous, maybe a little bit reckless with that Sun-Mars conjunction. But he gets on the right path and gets a goal with Jupiter in Capricorn. Eddie Money was incredibly successful. Whatever you think of him and his music, he was very successful. And his longevity in relationships, I think, is that Moon Saturn trine. And even with Venus, he's got some good emotional wiring here. Ultimately, some good emotional wiring. I think he was trying to prove himself something to his mother. Maybe his mother worked, and he wanted to make a shitload of money with her, because that Moon in the 6th house, that's the working mom, right? Anyway, a little detour there with the great Eddie Money. So what we want to do is we want to go to the chart of the moment. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. Anybody else? It's interesting. God, I'd love to do Senna's chart. We're pressed for time. Senna, let me just look at Senna's chart. Senna's amazing. Ayrton Senna. If you haven't seen the movie, the documentary Senna, I highly recommend it. I've seen it like half a dozen times. He's incredible. Senna is incredible. And so the thing I love about Senna, and I've played clips from his movie before on here, and I've gotten tagged. And the thing I love about Senna is that Neptune on the midheaven. When you see the movie, you understand the role of Neptune on the midheaven. It is the position of the mystic. And if you have Neptune on your midheaven, don't fret. It's actually, I think, a good position for Neptune. For me, the first house is a little tricky with Neptune. It's a little tricky. If you know who you are with Neptune on your ascendant, it gets better. If you don't know who you are with Neptune on your ascendant, it can be very confusing. Neptune in the 7th house, again, if you've worked out your relationships, and you're ready for a Neptunian seventh house relationship, it can be good. Of all the cardinal points, I think Neptune on the midheaven is the best. And if it's just slightly over here on this side of the midheaven, the ninth house, even better, because it's called accidental exaltation. But so Senna was very, very religious. He was very religious. He was a big Catholic, but he also had a relationship with speed. And I'm not talking the drug, I'm talking speed in his Formula One car as a manifestation of God. So when he was on and he was really in the zone, he would talk about how he would feel connected with God. Like it was the most mystical and divine thing that he could experience when he was in the zone at these breakneck speeds. He talks about it. The other thing too that's interesting about Senna is that he always did way better than anybody else when the track was wet. And to me, that's Neptune on the midheaven in trine with Mercury. And he did, like when other people were slowing down, Senna was speeding up. He had this relationship with water and rain that he was able to somehow take advantage of it. He was not as careful as other people were. He was also very impetuous. He's an Aquarius rising. He's different. He's just a different kind of cat. And with Mars in the first house, he's also confrontational. He had a long-running bout with Alain Proust, who was another Formula One driver, a Pisces, by the way. And they fucking hated each other. But at the end, Proust was a pallbearer at Senna's funeral. Ayrton Senna was the last. He was the last Formula One driver to die in a Formula One race in San Marino. And he died with a blow to the head. He's an Aries. He had part of his steering column break off his car and fire through the visor. Had it been a quarter of an inch higher, it would have hit his helmet. And Ayrton Senna would still be alive. But it went just below his helmet and drove itself right into this area just above the eye. It was probably right about there. In fact, I think it might have even gone through the eye, through his visor. I think that might have happened. So it was like, I think a half inch higher, it hits his head and he's alive. And the weird thing about his death is that he knew he was going to die. Like if you follow the documentary, he's up all night, he's reading the Bible. All these people, by the way, at this one Formula One event are crashing. One guy dies, one guy gets seriously injured. He's very distraught. He's racing out to meet the drive, to go to the cars. And this San Marino race was just it was a death trap. When did he die? He died on a really interesting day. What day was it? When did he die? Oh yeah, he had an affair with Shusha. May 1st, he died on May Day. And I always felt like there was this weird sacrificial energy around the death of Senna. It happened on May Day. It was all really, really weird. You just feel like there's some things that are there's something just incredibly strange about the timing of the event, the person. I mean, Senna was one of those guys who could have been big, internationally big, globally big. Somebody who could have been this spiritual icon. I mean, that's how big Senna was. When he died in Brazil, the Brazilians died. Part of Brazil died with him. That's how embedded he was in their psyche. And you watch the video and you realize that this guy had all these trusts and funds, and he was helping lots of people, and he loved Brazil. He absolutely loved Brazil, and he came from a wealthy family. And the thing about him is he didn't he enjoyed the good life. You know, if you watch the movie, you'll see him on boats. It's like his own private boat, and loved racing his boat. He didn't deny himself things. Let's put it that way. But he was tempestuous, but it wasn't like he was entitled. He had a sense of fairness and rightness and wrongness, I guess, if you want to play with that. And he was incredible that way. And he started from, racing little go-karts. He was in the go-kart circuit in Europe when he was young, and just moved his way up. It wasn't like, oh, let me go get a race car and go race daddy. No, he learned how to turn the wrenches and everything. And he wasn't your typical rich kid. So no, neither are you. Although you're a little entitled. You're a little spoiled at times. But Jasper, he deserves it. Jasper was born on the streets of San Francisco. He was a Quentin Martin production. Yes, you were honest. He was a street cat. And you ever see any of those people on the streets? They're pushing a cart and they got a cat with them. He was that cat, although he was a kitten. He wasn't a cat yet. And his owner knew that he deserved a better life. So off to the animal shelter he went. And he did not come to me directly, but I saw him. So I was divorced. And we had a family cat, and the family cat had passed away. So it was a weird time, right? So it was this weird time where, we're separated. We haven't signed these papers. We're still doing kind of like family things. It's kind of this weird period, this interregnum. So we go to the pound. Well, what do you call it? Animal control, animal rescue, whatever you want to call it, SPCA. We go there, and a friend of my wife's has these two kittens that she has said, oh, they're adorable. You should come pick them up. So we go there, and one of them was Rosie, and the other one was Jasper. So they were in, this little room, and we got to see them and hang out with them. And he was a little scaredy cat. You were a scaredy cat. Rosie was very, very social. And I actually said this, and I was wrong. See, I'm going to admit that I was wrong. I was wrong because I said, that little calico cat, she's great. I don't know about that other cat, though. He's got problems. You straightened those problems out, didn't you? Because he was almost feral. You grew up in the streets, the hard streets of San Francisco, the Tenderloin, down on 5th Street, hanging out with all the crack cats. Yeah. All right. See you later. All right. Let's get to that chart of the moment. That was an interesting little journey down Aries Lane, wasn't it? That cat outside, though, fuck. I think he's going to be like that dog Cujo or something. He's becoming a demon cat. Seriously. He's like 2 cats now. All right, let's look at the chart of the moment. All right, moon's in Scorpio, right? Yes, it is. Oh, we're right here. Hello. Hello, Equinox. Spring is here. Hear ye, hear ye. All right. So that's the chart of the moment. What are we paying attention to? There we go. There's the Venus-Mars conjunction in Aquarius. Who are the Venus-Mars conjunction? Twins, Isaac and Leah. There they are, right there. You're looking for a collective symbol of Venus and Mars. That's who they are. Flippity floppity. And they're both born, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, how old is this Isaac? Probably around the same. They both have Neptune and Uranus in Aquarius. So I talked about this a while ago. That's part of this strange thing that this early wave of Gen Z has, is that Neptune Uranus conjunction, which was going on with the millennials. The millennials had Neptune and Uranus in Capricorn. So Neptune Uranus kind of like this, right, together. So some of that bleeds into the first wave of Gen Z right around 1997 to what, around 2001, 2002, I think. My kid's born in 2004. He has Uranus and Pisces. So that little slice of Gen Z is different than the one that comes after it. And I think because of the Neptune-Uranus conjunction, that they have a different relationship with fluidity. That's my sense here. Not all of them do, but I think that's my sense. And it's because of that. The millennials kind of have that too, but it's different because they have it in Capricorn. It's not Aquarius, because in Aquarius, it's the collective. It's really the collective. It's really this kind of amorphic, unisexual sign and signifier of where things are going. Like, in a lot of ways, they are showing us where things are going, whether you agree with them or not, whether you think that it's fair for them to compete as a girl when you've been a guy most of your life, or you compete as a girl, but you're transitioning to a guy and you're taking, East German protocols in order to do that, which back in the day would get you banned from the Olympics. You'd lose your medals and you'd get banned, but now it's okay as long as you are transitioning, right? I mean, they're telling us something about where ultimately this is going, and that's about transhumanism and the fluidity between being a human and this synthetic hybrid of what it is to be a human and not a human. So that has a lot to do with who they are with this Neptune Uranus conjunction, which we will see get played out with Pluto in Aquarius. So I'm going to show you tonight the intergenerational relationship between Neptune and Pluto, and it's going to blow your mind. So these people, the Leah Thomases and the Isaac, whatever, I can't even remember, Hartzig, I think, is that his name? Her name? Whatever they are. The children that they will have will be from test tubes. Test tubes, they'll have children that will be CRISPR babies. That's where this is going. And a lot of it has to do with seeing how they're manifesting through this relationship with Neptune. And I'll show you how it works, because once you see this pattern and how these generations are decoded through Neptune and Pluto, it'll blow your mind and you'll get exactly what I'm talking about. So they're on full display with this Venus-Mars conjunction. And eventually they're going to hit Saturn. What's that going to be like? And I wonder, how long it will be before there's a backlash against. See, here's what's an interesting little wrinkle of this whole thing. Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, said that he didn't believe, or whatever. I don't think he's snipped, by the way, but he didn't believe that Leah Thomas should be competing. Right? He said that if you're going to transition, then just transition, or transition and compete as a male. He's like, this is ridiculous. So the archetypal, and by the way, I think Bruce Jenner might have a Venus-Mars conjunction too. I have to go back and look at his chart. He's an odd duck. Anyway, he's just saying, look, you're doing this, you're taking advantage of your biology, the biology that you built up until you decided that you were going to switch sides. and he didn't think it was appropriate. It wasn't sporting. He wasn't being a good sport. So this could get very interesting here as Venus and Mars move closer and closer to Saturn. We're not quite there yet. Venus will be there. Let's see. Venus will be there in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from today. So, well, just here. Let me just go into the ephemeris. It's easier that way. I don't have to do the math in my head. Where's that ephemeris? Ayrton Senna. Go watch that movie. It's amazing. Okay. Where are we? All right. Ephemeris. It's all about astrology. By the way, big shout out to Astro.com for providing so many free tools for people. You know, I should just subscribe to them for a few months just so I can pay them back for the use of their site. I used to subscribe to them, and then I went through a period where I didn't have that much money, so I had to stop subscribing. I can afford to subscribe to them now. All right, let's look at this Venus-Mars conjunction, or Venus. Where are we with Venus? All right, here we are, March 20th. And you can see right here on the ephemeris side of things, there's Mars, there's Venus. They're still pretty close. And when the meet started, which was, I think, last week, they were even closer, right? 8-7, 9-8. So here's Saturn over here. And let's see, Venus is going to hit Saturn right there on the 28th. 28th. What month? March. You know, I feel like that Venus-Saturn conjunction has a lot to do with constrictions and restraints around, you know, ideas. Because Aquarius is a strange sign in that it can embrace something like democracy. To me, this idea of democracy is very Aquarian. Democracy, socialism is very Aquarian. It's a different shade of it. A republic is a little bit less Aquarian. There are checks and balances inside of a republic. You got the 3 branches of government, that whole thing, right? So republic's a little bit different than, of course, we know it's different than democracy. Democracy is like mob rule. So you can get some of that with Aquarius, with the mob rule. But there are these ideas of like liberty and freedom. They tend to be Aquarian ideas, like theoretically, Leah Thomas should be free to be a man or a woman. And for all intents and purposes, that's true. If Leah Thomas wants to do that and the technology and the drugs are there, hey, whatever floats your, 100 freestyle, right? I mean, theoretically, yes. And there are other parts to that tend to get a little more murky when you're dealing with this idea of like this of being a republic, especially when you get into the attachments that they have, like the Disabilities Act and all that stuff that comes in, which is a good thing, but there are all these different pieces to this idea that started out a long time ago. And then you have the stuff that happened with like the Civil Rights Act, America's Disabilities Act. You have everything that happened with Johnson and the New Society and the Great Society and entitlements and all this bullshit, right? So it all comes together, and it's not really what it started off to be. And I'm not, and by the way, I am not arguing against civil rights by any stretch. I'm certainly not arguing against the rights of the disabled. That said, when you get into that territory, there's a lot of gray area, because civil rights now are not just about being able to vote or drink out of the same water fountain as somebody else, or stay at the same hotel as somebody else, or ride in a part of the bus where other people are allowed to ride. It morphs into something different. Right? It morphs into like where we're headed. And you could talk to somebody who, like Jason Whitlock or Delano Squires or Shamika Michelle, whom I've had on my show, and you ask them about the struggle between what happened in the 1960s with King and the whole civil rights movement, and the struggle with, you know, trans and LGBTQ plus, and trying to compare the two, and they'll laugh at you. There's really no comparison in a lot of ways, and yet they're being put together at the same level in the same playing field. So here's where we get into this kind of weird dysmorphia of the Constitution and being a republic, and it's all the attachments that come along with it, because within those attachments, they're open to interpretation. The Constitution's open to interpretation too, clearly, but they're open to interpretation. And when they have that interpretation, that's when these things begin to change this idea of the republic. And it becomes more based on not really mob rule, but the voice of the crowd, or the rule that is the loudest voice in the room. And that's what's been happening. And that's not a republic. It's a democracy, but it's not even a true democracy, because those voices, if you were to like carve out those voices and get a percentage of those voices, what might you get? Maybe 12%, maybe 22% if you ask somebody who's in the same room with somebody they don't want to offend. Maybe 22%. That's not a majority. It'd have to be 51% of the people. And I don't believe 51% of the people are on board with the social change that has been promoted, and not just promoted, but shoved into people's faces. I don't believe they are. And that's why we're in a culture war. It's because of that. We're totally in a culture war because of that. So this is I'm trying to bring it back to Aquarius. And this is where Aquarius does show up, because what Aquarius tries to do, and I think Squirrel and Brian would love this, because now I'm going to talk about communitarianism, is that it would theoretically make the needs of the few in a select group, a small select group, to represent the needs of the whole, and that the needs of the whole would have to rescind their rights and have their rights superseded by the rights of this smaller group for the greater good. And that's ultimately what communitarianism is about. Maybe we'll do a show on communitarianism. I have to get the right people to talk about it. But it's a very Aquarian kind of idea. A lot of people would call it the technocracy, but it's like the technocracy with feelings. That's what communitarianism is. So with this Venus-Saturn conjunction, I feel like that there is going to be, it's restrictive. To me, it feels restrictive, even though when you get into Venus-Saturn, it can be a good thing. Like Venus-Saturn conjunction in a person's chart means that they won't have very many relationships, but the ones they do have will last a long period of time, and that they will put time and effort into those relationships. It's not like a Venus-Jupiter conjunction where it's like, you know, plenty of relationships there, right? Like, didn't Eddie Money? No, Eddie Money had Venus-Jupiter sextile. That's right. So this is restrictive. This is restricted with this Venus-Saturn conjunction. And I'm just wondering when they're going to, bring back, COVID or whatever virus is, next on the list. And I think a lot of it depends on how long this prolonged conflict goes on in Ukraine. And I think for all intents and purposes, the Ukrainians are not doing well militarily. And I've seen a lot of things. I'm not going to play them here, but we're not getting the true story. And I'm not here to promote Vladimir Putin in Russia. I'm not here to do that. I'm certainly not here to promote Zelensky and his cabal. But if we just look at boots on the ground and what's happening, the Ukrainians are getting their asses kicked, and they're having these people, these useful idiots, come over and fight for them, and they're getting blown up while they're doing jumping jacks. You got to be kidding me. So where's my camera? Am I still here? Oh, here I am. You didn't see me. You just saw the ephemeris. Anyway, the Venus Saturn. So here's what I think. At some point, I don't think we're going to go to World War III. I don't think that's going to happen. But this needs to play out for a period of time until they get ready to ramp up the next thing. And it's going to do enough damage. Trust me, it's already doing a lot of damage. It's doing damage to the economy. It's doing damage to people's pocketbooks. We're looking weaker and weaker and weaker. And China specifically is having a little flirtation with the Saudis about buying petroleum with the yuan. And when that happens, the reserve currency, which has essentially insulated the dollar as being the world's currency, is pretty fucked. And it could have very serious ramifications here in this country. Very, very serious. And we could be on the doorstep of a depression way bigger than what they went through in the 1920s. Seriously. And not only that, but there are a lot of other things that are happening as well. There are fires all over the place. Farms are being set on fire. Lumber yards are being set on fire. Distribution centers are being set on fire. That's all strategic, by the way. That's to be. We just had a huge fire in West Texas. There's a lot of cattle farms. There's a lot of cattle land. Also, we may get some rain this week, but I would not be surprised if Texas goes through a drought. I would not be surprised at all during the next few weeks, next few months. I think we had hardly any water this winter. And the worst thing that we could get would be a huge amount of water. That could be bad, but also I think we could be going through a drought. And Texas went through a drought before I got here. And I got here in 2012, and it rained like crazy. But you go back and you look at 2010 and 2011, and it was really bad here, especially 2010. I remember seeing pictures of cows that are all bony because of the drought. And that could happen again. And based on where we are with the money stuff, the food stuff, I could see that happening. Anyway, so we've got the Venus-Saturn conjunction. I feel like that's okay. So I can see that period of time where there could be some kind of an agreement or accord with Ukraine and Russia. I could see that with the Venus-Saturn conjunction. The problem is that the West and NATO, and to some extent Ukraine, but mostly the West, and they don't want to have a peaceful solution. They don't want that. What they want is to draw this thing out for as long as possible, see if they can bleed Russia out, which I don't think they'll be able to do, and ultimately continue to turn Vladimir Putin and the entire Russian people into a cross between, I don't know, vampires and the offspring of Adolf Hitler. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. And the longer that they're able to prolong this and come up with, footage or whatever they come up with, and have Fred Kagan do 120-minute interviews with Jordan Peterson promoting this thing, well, they'll have a shot at it. But at some point, life will become very, very grim and difficult in Ukraine. And I'm not sure how long it will be before the people in Ukraine have their own version of some kind of a revolt. And that's not even the government itself. I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure how they're going to be able to do that. But if they somehow so let's just say Russia goes to the West and says, okay, we have a deal for you. What's that? Well, here's the deal. The deal is we're going to make it look like you won, but you're going to give us everything. So you will get a face-saving moment. You will allow, but here's the deal: Zelensky can't be there. You can have a duly elected and newly elected replacement. Whatever he does, however he leaves, he needs to go. However that happens, whatever, you can fake his death. You could have him do whatever, right? He can go work for the fucking UN, but he can't be there. They have to have an election. It's got to be fair, and the Kagans can't be there. It's got to be a real election. And you could even have Zelensky say, hey, look, we won. Isn't this great? Fantastic. Blah, 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 blah. We were able to do this. And as a result of this, and having spent all this time and effort and energy in order to fight this war, I'm going to step back and I'm going to allow the country to have another election because I'm called to the world stage, or whatever the fuck you want to say. So then they have this election, and Russia, meanwhile, gets its stuff in writing, right? Like, you're not going past this line. This is what's going to happen. And we get Crimea and Donetsk. And that's it. We just want everything on the other side of this river. And you could have Zelensky negotiate that. It's negotiated somehow, but you can win that way. You could say, yes, we've talked to the people in the West, and because of whatever, their desire to, we're just going to focus on the eastern part of Ukraine at this point, and the western part will get humanitarian aid. And because a lot of the damage was done by the Russians will then help rebuild that area. He could say that, right? He could say that, and some people will buy it. And then they move on. They can move on, and it looks like Zelensky wins, but Russia really wins. I could see that happening, possibly. But if that happens, then this next phase happens, and I think they'll roll out the superbug again. Because really, what this is like George Floyd on steroids. This is what this war is. It's like George Floyd on steroids. Like, Ukraine is the George Floyd of Europe. And just as people were just getting so fucking sick of the lockdowns, and we had these truckers rallies and all this other stuff going on, it's like, okay, let's have something even bigger than that. Let's have a war. That's exactly what happened. And then what happened after that? Well, we went back into the old COVID thing, didn't we? So I think that's a real possibility. And Mars is going to conjunct Saturn not long after that. So we got a Mars-Saturn conjunction on April. That's going to be, so April 1st, Mars is at 19 Aquarius. Saturn is at 23 Aquarius. And Venus is still there. So they're both there, part of the conjunction. Isn't that something? Venus moves quickly and Mars catches up. So Mars is going to be at 22. So on 4/4/22, circle that day, Venus at 29 Aquarius. And then we have Sun conjunct Chiron during this time. Wow. Interesting time. A lot of martial energy. We have the new moon. So the first, we've got new moon in Aries, Sun in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Venus, Mars conjunction, Saturn. Bang. That's a time. That is a time. That is a day with not a lot of mercy. We do have the Jupiter Neptune conjunction. That comes right after it. Man, April is a banger, I'm telling you. Wow. Jupiter Neptune comes in on April 9th. Interesting. Venus shows up as well. Oh, yeah. You like that Venus, don't you? When does Venus come in? Let's see. So everything comes together with Venus and Jupiter and Neptune. It's the closest. The 30th of April. 30th of April, we have Venus in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, and Neptune in Pisces. Then we have Mars. Man, this Venus Mars dance we have, that happened when Venus went retrograde in Capricorn last year at the end of the year. So it wound it up and then cocked it and moved it forward so it could track with Mars. Wow, interesting. Yeah, you get into the end of April, that's a lot of water. That's like deluge energy. It's like flooding energy. What's going on with Antarctica? It's got really fucking hot in Antarctica, right? Aren't you glad you're not in Antarctica? Maybe better for you now. Anyway, that's also really, it's funny how we get the word delusional. Like there's delusional and then there's deluge. They're very close. And they both have to do with Pisces in a lot of ways. Delusional and water, it's like what's going on. Because Pisces is one of those signs that is connected to being delusional. Not all Pisces are delusional, but it is connected to the sign, especially at a collective level. But there's also the deluge and the flood connected to that word as well. So the end of April, a lot of emotion, a lot of water. In the beginning of April, it's really harsh, right? We have all that fire at the beginning of April. And then it moves into all this water. So April is a very trippy month. Very, very trippy month. We have extreme heat starting at the beginning of April. And with Sun, Moon, Mercury, and then we have the Venus-Mars conjuncting Saturn. So that's both heat, fire, air, combustibility. A lot of combustibility in the early part of the month. And then by the end of the month, it's completely different. It's, over wet in a lot of ways. From the standpoint of a social condition, like those are really hard aspects, in that Aries tends to be really martial. Those could be very warlike aspects, or they could be maybe that's where this whole thing gets negotiated out. That it reaches kind of a fever pitch at the beginning of April. And then by the end of April, it's all peacey. And then, oh God, we almost had a nuclear war. But we beat Russia. And Russia's like, no, you didn't. We're going to let you think that. But we got what we wanted. Anyway, that's a possibility. All right. I'm going to move on to really the meat of the show. And that is this little pattern that I discovered And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I'm sure there are other astrologers out there that have done this, but I've never seen it. Doesn't mean it hasn't been discovered or found. But I've been doing this for a while, but I've just never seen it. But then again, I don't travel around a lot of other astrological circles. I'm just that way. Okay. So where are we? Here it is. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to track some generations here. We're going to track some generations. Where's, okay, right there. All right. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make like an entire slideshow, but I just didn't have the time because I got home a little bit, I got home in the afternoon trying to take care of some business and relax a little bit. But I did put together basically a bullet point of where we're going. So we're going to look at how generations are connected through Neptune and Pluto. And we're going to start with the Depression era. And we're going to go all the way to Gen A. Now, this is a millennial mother who has a Gen A kid. And I think, unfortunately, this is a symbol in a lot of ways of, well, a lot of things. But you'll find out later. And it all starts here, really, during the Depression. Now, this is a Depression era family. And you'll see different photos, because I was looking through all these Depression era photos. And you'll see some families that are very destitute. You'll see other families on farms, and they don't have much, but they're a family. And they're pitching in together. Right. So this is kind of where it all starts, are these Depression era parents. And this is where we are now, right? It's a very different picture of what a family looks like. And, she's a single mom with her in vitro baby who has a mask on. Yeah, possibly. I mean, that's what it looks like. Because where's dad? Dad's not there. And they're both wearing fucking masks. And here we have three generations. Right? We have Ma and Pa and the kids. And now I bet you that's grandma. So you got three generations here. 1, 2, 3. Here you have 2. And you have, I'm assuming, husband, wife, single mother. So let's get into this. And I think it's really interesting because we can see the hope, the promise, the challenge, the delusion, and how it gets worked out by the generation that is the offspring of the parents who go through those hopes and challenges and delusions and all that. So you'll see it's pretty cool. All right. So we're going to start with the Depression era generation. Now, they are not the silent generation. The silent generation, it comes a little bit later. My parents was born in 1960. My parents would represent the silent generation. They're not baby boomers. And they are not the Depression era families who might have been a little boomy, or sorry, a little silent. But a lot of those people were born in 1905, 1900s. I think Trump's father was born in 1905, if I'm not mistaken. So, And they have a period here. I'm just going to bring this up. I'll show you. So this is what we're going to be looking at here. And you can see that there are these patterns. And I'll get into these patterns and how these things get worked out. So the Depression era generation, 1915, Neptune goes into Leo. So these kids are born into the end of the Gilded Age. So prior to the Depression, and even coming out of World War I, there's a lot of money, and so a lot of these kids they're young. They don't really, some of them may not really understand what their life is like, because for the most part, it's not a bad life. And even if you weren't in the gilded, quote unquote, gilded age, you didn't have all the fruits, all the economic fruits literally falling in front of you during that period of time, including, by the way, stocks that were based on margin, buying on margin, and just all those things that were just kind of there. And it's like, well, this person can do it. People began to believe that if you were an American, you were entitled to the good life, right? Europe had been just completely crushed during World War I. The United States was untouched. And there's a lot of prosperity coming out of that. Manufacturing starts to happen in a bigger way. Men come home from the war. If they didn't have the Spanish flu, they're looking for jobs. And they took the men. This is another thing they fucking did. They took the men. Prior to World War I, men were not into working in factories. They weren't. You go back to the 1900s, early 1900s, it's women and children. I've shown those pictures. They're the ones that are in factories. Men are not into working in factories. They have too much pride to work in a factory. They have crafts that they do. They're boot makers, or they're horseshoers, or they're making things. That's what they were like. No, I don't. Or they're farmers. They don't want to work in factories, but they come back from the war, and now their lives have been disrupted. Not all of them, but a lot of them were. Their lives have been disrupted. And I think at that point, they're more easily moved into this industrial life that is really starting to, get its wings at that time. So they're born into the Gilded Age, but they start to have kids. It's actually World War I, not World War II. I take that back. It is World War II. I apologize. Okay, because these guys will be the ones that will fight in World War II. So when you think of Neptune, right, what is Neptune about? Neptune is about these ideas of delusion, and it has this vibe of hope and dreams. And Neptune and Leo, it's like, we have, we're here. We have this potential for a life and prosperity that theoretically, families that are from a bloodline, or families that are part of the aristocracy, are part of. So we are part of the new aristocracy, and there's some truth to that, but it's also delusional, because that is going to fall. That curtain is just going to fall, right? So these kids are born during this time, and they go through the Depression. So by the time the 20s roll around, they're around 9, 10. They're in their teens, and then they live through that. They live through the Depression, and World War II starts in 1937, I think, right after the Olympics starts. So if it was 1937, they're about, and by the way, Neptune and Leo just starts there. It's going through the teens, right? So they're hitting the war 18, 19 years old. So the kids born during this time are the ones going over to World War II. And they start having children a little bit later because they've gone to the war. And they come back, and Pluto and Leo begins in 1940. But the war is really not over until 1944, 45, right around. Finally, it's over in 1945. And that's when all these kids start being born. And this is when Pluto goes into Leo during this time. And this is where the baby boomers are born, 1940 to 1956. Because Pluto goes into Leo in 19, but they don't start really having kids until roughly, let's say 1944. Trump is born in 1942. I don't believe his father fought in World War I. His father was born in 1905. So Trump has an older father. He also has, I guess, an older brother. And his older brother would have been born probably around Trump's born 47. So I'm betting his older brother's born about 1943, even though I'm not looking at it. But the baby boomer wave really starts around 1944, 1945. And there's a lot of kids that are born during that time. So you can see the relationship between Neptune and Leo and Pluto and Leo. So if we go back and we look at those Depression era parents, what do? Well, they make a shit ton of money, right? Because what did they first of all, they'd gone through the Depression as children. And as children, they didn't get a lot. They just didn't get a lot, period, end of story. And as a result of that, they want to make sure their kids are going to get more than they did. Isn't that what every parent wants to do? So they focus on wealth. They focus on building wealth. And I saw that with my grandparents. They were born during that time. And they focused on building wealth. In fact, they were born a little bit earlier, probably around, I don't know, my grandmother was 16 when she had my father. But she was part of that generation. So if my father was born in 35, so my mother was born in, 1925, and 6 from that, so 1919. So yeah, Neptune and Leo. It's funny she married Leo. So they want to have those good things, right? So with Neptune, there's this hope and this aspiration, and they want to, because they before the Depression, they kind of have a little taste of it if you're in some part of the United States, and it's not too bad, right? But then it gets hard. They go through that. They go through World War II. They come out of World War II with all this manufacturing and all this opportunity. Like there's a lot of money being made in the United States after World War II. And they're the generation that is there. They're the ones that are working these factory jobs, and they're moving up. They're getting into, upper management. My grandfather was like that. He moved up, got into upper management. He made a really, really good salary, and they invested too, right? So then they have these Pluto and Leo kids, these baby boomers, like my aunt and my uncle. They're both baby boomers. My father's not a baby. So they have Pluto and Leo. So what happens with Pluto is that there's this consummation of the dream, or there's this consummation of the hope. And then they have to deal with the reality, because when we deal with Scorpio, right, Scorpio has a lot to do with procreation. So we get into Pluto, we get into procreation cycles, or the procreation, and then the manifestation of the procreation. So now we have these kids with Pluto and Leo, and they have a pretty good life. The baby boomers have a good life, because for them, not all of them have a great time, by the way. They don't all have a great time, but they generally do have a very good time, and they have fairly good economic standards. They will deal with war, as we'll see when we go through this. But they also get the fruits of, number one, their parents' hard work, their parents' investments, and they get a lot of that. And then they're able to capitalize on that. And they have this they're like the firstborn. Like if you look at, all of these generations, they're like the firstborn in the modern American story, post World War II. And they've got a lot of really good resources. Life is not ostentatiously wealthy like it was during the Gilded Age, but there's plenty to go around, more than plenty to go around. You could buy a house on a relatively modest salary. When they come back from the war, that's all there. It's all possible. And they're the generation that is able to benefit. So what happens with this Depression era generation is that when they come home, they have the GI Bill. And the GI Bill is set up for men mostly, but there were women too. You had wax and waves, things like that, but mostly men to go to college. And so you see the whole college thing begin to explode during that time. But it's really the baby boomers who are this massive tranche and this massive demographic. They're the ones that will go into colleges and occupy colleges. So the most college degrees will come out of the baby boomer generation. Now, again, the GI Bill helps these men that are coming back from the war, but they're not the ones. Some of them will go to college, by the way, and they'll do quite well. But a lot of them won't. They'll come home with a skill from the war, whether it's working on an aircraft or flying, and they'll get a job somewhere with one of the aerospace companies. The space came after Aero, but McDonnell Douglas or Boeing, they'll come home and they'll work in those industries. And the same thing if they've had some kind of training with radios, they'll come back home and they'll work in the communications field. That's blowing up, right? You have telephone really taking off. Before World War II, you'd get on the phone and you talk to an operator and say, operator, give me Chesterfield 5 or whatever, right? Chesterfield 7.5, or that's how you would call people. And the operator would go like this. And then eventually all that stuff gets transformed and you're able to dial directly. And that's all part of what happens post World War II. All these things that happened prior to World War I with Uranus and Aries, they make all these incredible, well, if you talk about Tartaria, maybe they're just reinventing a lot of these things, but they all come up like during that period prior to 1925 to 1932. That 7-year period, you see so many things get invented. And then after the war, they start to manufacture this stuff. So these guys during the war, what do? They get to R&D it. That's what they're doing. And they get trained in it and they come back home and they're the ones that will ultimately occupy these industries and they will make good money. And their kids are born during this time and they will go to college and they will become the baby boomers. And then with that, right? So we start with the hope and the dream of Neptune, and then we deal with the transformed dream, which is Pluto. And then we see at times, and every generation has it, by the way, they all have it. Then we see the excess of Pluto and Leo. We see this idea of entitlement. And it's really funny if you go back and you look at these kind of seminal figures that we talk about from the baby boomer, from here, apparently when I sit back, when we talk about these seminal figures from the baby boom generation, we often look at whether or not they served in the military. The first name that often comes to mind is Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent's story around dodging his draft board is both hilarious and a sign of the fact that Ted Nugent didn't want to go fight in Vietnam. But everybody points to Ted Nugent as he's the one that somehow managed to avoid the draft. Well, he wasn't alone. Bruce Springsteen did the same fucking thing. Bruce Springsteen pretended he was crazy. Now, Ted Nugent did too. But I think you could make a case that Ted Nugent is closer to crazy than Bruce Springsteen. I do. You can make that case. And I first read about Ted Nugent's stunt to stay out of the draft. It's fucking hilarious. I read about it in High Times magazine when I was a teenager. I laughed my ass off. He wrote it.
He wrote about it. He stayed up. I think he wore the same pants for a week and he pissed and shit in those pants. And he stayed up for like 3 days or something. And Ted Nugent did something that he normally would never do. He took some MDMA and it made him, he was just speeding out. They 4F'd him. And so they did the same thing with Springsteen, but Springsteen wasn't even that creative. He just said he was crazy. So Springsteen got out of it. George Bush Jr. got out of it. Donald Trump got out of it. All these guys they dodged the draft. I really don't blame them. It was a fucked up war. Right. But that didn't happen with other generations. They didn't do that. They didn't say, oh, I'm going to go. No, World War I and World War II, if you were drafted, shit, a lot of those guys volunteered. You know, that shows you in some ways where they were at. I wouldn't have, but that's where the zeitgeist was for the country. Not Pluto and Leo. We're not going to go fight. We're not going to go fight in that war. No, we're not. Because some of, and I don't blame them, but some of that entitlement comes up, and you even look at people like Clinton and Bush and even Trump. They all have this sense of entitlement. Springsteen kind of does. I don't know if Ted Nugent does. Ted Nugent's a Sagittarius. I think what you see is what you get with Nugent for the most part. Anyway, but you see this with Pluto and Leo. You see this with, their connection with, for all intents and purposes, again, this is a blanket statement, but it's kind of like being spoiled in some ways because they get all the goodies, right? So we see Neptune transform this hope and this dream. The other thing too is Neptune and Leo is very creative and very artistic. Now, this is where I'm going to give the baby boomers some love. And I've talked about this before. They're fucking creative. Like, they're really good songwriters, really good singers. They're really good directors. They're really good with music. There's some excellent writers. Like, I'm giving them some props here because they are good artists. And it comes out of this Neptune and Leo, right? It's the transformed function of Neptune. And you get the bright side or the good side, and you also get the dark side. And every one of these generations will go through it. And what's interesting is that Pluto and Leo really gets into love. Now, I'll show you what happens with the boomers when we creep up. When we creep up here, because the boomers have, guess what? They have Neptune and Libra. And who are they the parents of? Well, if Pluto and Libra is Gen X, the boomers are the parents of the Gen Xers. Okay, so let's move on to the silent generation. So the silent generation are my parents. And they're born starting 1928. But again, there's a war. And by the way, the Depression era kids, they're very young. They do see World War I, but they wind up fighting World War II. I just want to clarify that, right? So the silent generation, my parents, my mother was born in 35. My father was born in 35. My mother's born in 38. So she's right there at the cutoff, right? 1940 is when Pluto goes into Leo. So she's right there kind of at the end. It goes into Leo in 1939, goes retrograde, comes back into Pluto and Leo in 1940. So that's a clear demarcation. So the silent generation, my parents have Neptune and Virgo. And their parents are obviously a little bit older, right? A little bit older than these parents here. So their parents would have had, let's see, where's their Pluto is in Cancer. So their parents would have had Neptune in Cancer. So they have Neptune in Virgo, and they're growing up during World War II. They're growing up during World War II. So with Neptune and Virgo, they go through shortages. They go through shortages during that time. There's rationing. I think they might have gone through the daylight savings thing during that time. And Neptune is in its, isn't it in detriment or something in Virgo? I think it's in its detriment. It's in its fall in Virgo. It's in its detriment. Believe it or not, Pluto in Virgo is in its detriment. So it's in its fall. Neptune in Virgo is in its fall. It's in its detriment with Pluto in Virgo. So now they have to go through this deprivation based on what happens to the war. Right now, they do grow up in the 50s, but by the time they hit the 50s, they're starting to hit their late teens and 20s. So they're not quite there yet, right? They're not quite in that period where they're getting ready. They will get ready to go fight in the Korean War, by the way. That will be their war. But they're not going to get that sweet spot of growing up as a baby boomer. Like those kids are younger. Like my mother has she had two younger brothers that were, I'd consider baby boomers. And one of them has died, right? And so they get the goodies. My parents, who grew up during this period with Neptune, they don't really get the goodies. So they go to the Korean War. They're dealing with Neptune and Virgo, shortages. You know, I think they're also maybe the first generation that has to deal with things like the polio. The baby boomers will get the polio vaccine as well. But I think their generation is the first ones to get the polio vaccine, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty sure about that. Chuck Dieterich was part of that generation. He might have been a little bit old. Anyway, so they're starting to go through health things. Like the pharma thing is starting to come into play here with that generation. And they start to have kids later, again, due to the Korean War. So men are, again, fighting this war. And they start to have children after the Korean War. And I think that ends, the 50s? Like we're around 55, 56, something like that. So they start having kids. And guess what? They start having Pluto and Virgo kids. And I think the Pluto and Virgo kids are different than the boomer kids. That's me, right? And I've never really related in some ways to the boomers. I mean, I can in some ways, but it's like their world is different than my world. You know, they grew up in the 50s. I grew up in mostly in the 50s. I grew up in the 70s. It's a very different world. You know, they're growing up with Chuck Berry and the Beatles and, you know, and I'm growing up with the Sex Pistols and Roxy Music and fucking disco, right? It's a very different time. And they're already off and making money and, you know, buying businesses and buying homes. And, you know, we're just still graduating and matriculating out of high school. So it's a different generation. I can tell you that right now. So now we have Pluto and Virgo, but we're inheriting something from this Neptunian thing. You know, what is the hope and the aspiration with Neptune and Virgo? Well, I can tell you it's not great. It's not really great because I remember just the and maybe this has to do with Pluto and Cancer too, but I remember my parents having this weird relationship with money and goods. Like they would spend like drunken sailors sometimes and use credit cards, and then they would tear them up because they'd run into all this debt. So they had this weird thing, and maybe it's a Neptune and Virgo thing. Maybe it's the Pluto and Cancer thing. But with, you know, you get these Neptune Pluto sextiles all throughout the 20th century. You'll see this. And I had to inherit their weird thing with money, right? So I have Pluto and Virgo, and I'm like, well, I saw them doing these jobs. That's the other part of Neptune and Virgo, is that my parents did jobs. And they did jobs where they had to sacrifice. They didn't go to college. You know, they didn't go to college. They didn't get the the real benefits of the GI Bill in a lot of ways. The people in the 60s got the benefits of the GI. Like guys coming over from Vietnam, a lot of those guys went to college. My father didn't go to college. He did get the benefits of the GI Bill with a low interest loan, I think, from the VFA. I think it was the VFA or VHA, whatever. But they worked McJobs. And I would look at my father. I'm like, you're really fucking talented. How come you're not doing something you love? And he was a Leo, and I've looked, and he made both of these rings. He was a very fine artist. He was a great craftsman, but he worked a fucking McJob all of his life. And my mother, she didn't work a McJob, but she did that Virgo thing. She worked, guess what? She worked for the Navy. That's Neptune, right? I mean, it's clearly a very Neptunian thing to work for the Navy. And she went in and she worked her ass off. And she got a position by the end of her run in the Navy where she was a GS8 or a GS9 or a GS10. She was a high GS. I forget which one she was. But the equivalent of her GS was the equivalent of like a GS for, like a guy that had a degree in engineering. So again, that's Neptune and Virgo. It's like, getting these shit jobs or these hard jobs. And if you were good, you'd work your way up and you would rise to a certain level. And so I would see that, right, with Pluto and Virgo. I'm like, well, fuck, I want to do something that's got some meaning. I just don't want to do a McJob. I want to have my job be transformational. That's what I want. I want to have a transformational job. Right. So now we're the first generation that's not affected by war. Like the baby boomers, they're going to be affected by not only their parents being in war, but they're going to be affected by the Vietnam War. So my generation, I will see the war as a child and it will affect me, but I won't have to fight in a Vietnam or Korea or World War II or World War I. And nobody in my generation did have to. So we're the first generation that's not affected by that. But fourth and fifth generation warfare is starting to happen at that time. So if they're not going to have a war that I'm going to have to go fight in, then they're going to have to go get inside of our heads, right? So you have MK Ultra happening during the 1960s, like all this crazy shit, Project Mockingbird. You have the Phoenix Project. All these projects are happening. You have the Russian infiltration of the United States and the demoralization thing going on. You have the takedown in Nixon. So, even though my generation is not at war, what's happening? We're getting bombarded by fourth and fifth generation warfare. So we are at war, and we're the byproducts of that war in some ways. And so what do we have? Well, we have, guess what? We have Neptune in Scorpio. Hello. So what are we into? Like we're into drugs. We're into things like psychic research and intuition and goth music. Like when I'm a kid, guess what book comes out? It's The Exorcist, right? That's very Scorpio. And I read The Exorcist when I was a kid. They had all these devil movies coming out when I was a kid. All Neptune. Some of that was Neptune goes into Sagittarius in 1970. So I think by that time, I guess would be Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby comes out with Neptune and Scorpio. But this whole idea of the underworld, right? The Manson family, that's all very Neptune and Scorpio. It's dark. You got Jim Morrison, The Doors. You've got this the 60s now are turning really from sunshine, Superman to heroin and speed and all the hard drugs that are coming back from Vietnam, which are all very much Neptune and Scorpio. And also my generation, I think, is the first generation that has access to mainstream pornography, which is very Neptune and Scorpio as well. You go down the store and you could, find a copy of Playboy and read through it and, go to the centerfold, right? Or somebody you knew your kid's father or whatever would have these little smutty rags around. We'd found that stuff, right? But it was mainstream. So, with Neptune and Scorpio, we're having our libidos, right, opened up in a way that is very different than any other generation. Like the baby boomers had Raquel Welch in the 60s, and we had something completely, we had Raquel Welch and Playboy in the 70s. That's what was going on. So that's all very scorpionic. So we're dealing with these Scorpio issues, right? So we want to have purpose. We want to have this thing that we saw that our parents did. And I guess maybe even the Pluto and Leo kids, right? When they look at their parents with Neptune and Leo, they're like, well, fuck, you guys didn't have any fucking fun. You worked your ass off, and you became, in a lot of ways, like the people that laid the tracks for the latter part of the 20th century. But we're gonna have fun. We're gonna play. We're gonna be artists, right? So for me, with Neptune and Virgo planets, I wanted to have something that was meaningful. I wanted to help people, right? But it also needed to be intrinsically connected to something transformational, that I wasn't going to go through the kind of McJob phase or watch my parents toil in things because they needed to or had to, and they did. And honestly, I had a bit of more of a luxury than they did. So, I hung out and I did that. And I know a lot of people from my generation did. And by the way, the Pluto and Virgo people are the ones that lay the track for the information highway. So now, we have this Neptune and Scorpio, and guess where it's going to come out? Yeah. It's going to come out with the millennials. So technically speaking, I should have had a millennial kid, because when I was in my 20s, you'll see it when this happens, right? So all the things that we played around with, like all that dark stuff that Neptune and Scorpio played around with, whether it was, tripping on drugs or getting into really dark music. And I went through a phase where like really, fucking Black Sabbath was dark, and they were popular when I was a kid. Zeppelin, take you into dark territory, dark drug land with so all that stuff was part of our soundtrack, right? For the, early, for the most part. Later on it changes, but that's what we kind of, even as a kid, like there was interesting, because it's born into us, even though Neptune changes, we like that music. We like, things like Sisters of Mercy and Bauhaus and, Dead Can Dance. That's all Neptune and Scorpio kind of music. So we're into that, right? And it's going to come out later with the Pluto and Scorpio, the millennials. So I became a late father. So I became a father when Gen X was having kids. You'll see that, because my the mother of my kid, born in 1973, which qualifies her as being Gen X, and she was right in that zone, right? All right, so let's go on. Let's look at Gen X now. Neptune goes into Sagittarius in 1970. Now they are the second generation, right? The second generation. And they have Pluto, not in Sag, my bad here. They have Pluto in Libra. Okay. So their Neptune, which is exalted, has a lot to do with spirituality. And I love Generation X. I mean, I like all these generations, but Generation X, I dig, because they have some great outer planet attributes. They get a bit, especially during the late 60s, like, again, I would consider 1968, 69, maybe 67 to be Gen X-y. I think Gen X, the cutoff for Gen X is really about 66, I think. Depending on where you are in 60, I think Gen X has its roots in 67, 68, 67. Definitely by 1970, it is on. Right? That's when Neptune is in Sagittarius, moves into Sagittarius, and Gen X has these, especially after 1970, you got Pluto in Libra, boom, Uranus in Sag, and Uranus in Scorpio, and Neptune in Sagittarius. Uranus in Scorpio is exalted, Neptune in Sagittarius is exalted. It's a really great generation for those outer planets to have in your chart. Now, you will run into like early on, what's 70, 71, you get Saturn in Taurus. During the 60s, like 67, 68, you'll see Saturn in Aries. That's a hard Saturn, right? But after that, you're starting to see even Saturn in Pisces, I think is a little bit difficult. But Saturn in Aries, Saturn in Taurus, by the time you get into Saturn in Gemini, it starts to get a little bit better, I think. Anyway, so Gen X shows up right around 1970. So the baby boomers now who were born for, during this period of time, let's say they're being born in the like 47. Okay, so Donald Trump would be a really good like symbol of a baby boomer, right? Well, he's got Gen X kids. I think Don Trump Jr. I know Eric is a Gen Xer, and I think is Melania millennial. I think she might be a millennial. Not Melania, Ivanka. No, Melania's not a millennial. Melania is she's born in like 65, wasn't she? So Ivanka is a millennial, but Eric is a Gen Xer. And Don Trump Jr., I think, is right on the cusp of being Gen X, but Eric is a Gen Xer. So you see the baby boomers who are having babies, like they're born, like they come in around 47. So by the time they hit their 20s, like by the time they hit 1967, they're 20. And if they've gone to war, they're going to have kids later. They're going to come back and have kids. Maybe some had them before they went to war, or they have them if they go to college, they get a deferment. They're having them after college. So they're going to have kids around 24, 25. Not everybody, but a lot of them do. So let's just use, say, 1946 as our marker. We go to 1966, they're 20. You add 4 years, right? We're in 1970, Neptune and Sag. And even before then, they're starting to give birth to Gen X. So Gen X, your parents are baby boomers, right? So what happens with the baby boomers? The baby boomers have divorce. So Gen X is this generation that I call generation, ex-father or ex-mother or ex-husband or ex-wife. I mean, that's part of what Gen X is about, because they're the offspring of the greatest divorce rate that happens. So my parents, they didn't have a great marriage, but they stayed together, right? That's Pluto and Cancer. So they stayed together, even though it wasn't a great marriage at times. So there wasn't the high divorce rate with the Pluto and Cancer and Neptune and Virgo. Pluto and Leo, they want to go explore themselves. Remember, they've got Neptune and Libra. So what are they going to do? They're going to dissolve their relationships. And how does that manifest? It's going to manifest in their kids who have Pluto and Libra. And guess what? They're going to experience divorce. And I went through this with Neptune and Virgo with my father, right? I saw him lose fucking jobs. I saw him lose 2 jobs over the course of his lifetime. And both those times that he lost those jobs, it was fucking traumatic. And it turned our family life upside down both times. And so it's like, man, I don't want any of that shit, right? And so what happens with these Neptune, the baby boomers have Neptune and Libra. They're like, I want to go find my soulmate, right? And so this whole thing with the baby boomers and Generation X is really interesting, because you will see the apotheosis of the baby boomers with The Big Chill. That is their fucking movie. That is their movie, except for what's her name? Who's in it? Oh man. Not Arquette. It's the other family. Oh, shit. I have it here. Hold on. Anyway, they're all boomers. By the way, William Hurt passed away, and William is an Aries. I think is today his birthday. When is William's birthday? He's in The Big Chill, of course. So look, I'll show you here. So the baby boomers have love story. Love is never having to say you're sorry. But then by the time they grow up, right, they're deep in the froth of relationships. Meg Tilly, that's what I'm thinking of. Meg Tilly. Here, I'll show you the big chill. I grabbed this clip right here. So there we go, right? Here's your baby boomers. Tom Berenger, Kevin Kline, also known as Mrs. Bill Gates. There's Meg Tilly. Like, I think she's the young chick that somebody's brought in. There's William Hurt. Rest your soul, William. Who's that? Mary Beth. What's her name? What's her name? Mary Kay Place. Jo Beth Williams. That's Jo Beth Williams. Jeff Goldblum. Right. So they're going through this whole relationship thing with the big chill, the meaning of life. Lawrence Kasdan, looking at his generation, divorces, people that, all brought together by a guy that dies, who's Kevin Costner. Now, what do we see with Gen X? Where do we see that worked out? The movie Singles. This is like the precursor. This is like post Gen X, right? And again, Pluto and Libra dealing with these relationships. Right here, right? Singles. Comes out in the 90s. Young Gen Xers. Look at Bridget Fonda. She apparently she's put on a lot of weight. Matt Dillon. Citizen Dick. I lived in Seattle, by the way, when they were filming this movie. This totally captures the zeitgeist of Seattle. But you can see, right? Neptune and Libra, big chill. What is the meaning? Disillusion of relationships, divorces, affairs, all those things couched in there with Pluto and Leo trying to find real love, true love. And they have Gen X as an offspring. And what are they dealing with? They're dealing with the divorce, and they're dealing with relationship as a transformational component, right? So we look at Neptune, and it's the hope, it is the dream, it is the illusion. And then their offspring comes along and they work out the transformational component of that and say, okay, well, I don't want this. So I don't know what the exact divorce statistics are with Gen X, but I think they tend to stay together. That's my sense. Although I do know a lot of Gen Xers have gotten divorced. Not because they wanted to get, I think a lot of them wanted to stay in these marriages, but they didn't. I tend to think it's a generation that does value relationship and does want to have relationship. But growing up in those baby boomer households where divorce was really prevalent, by the way, how did that happen? Vatican II. They changed the rules of divorce. So if you're a Catholic, it made it a lot easier to get a divorce. Before that, there was a stigma with having a divorce. Vatican II changed all that. All of a sudden, divorce became a hell of a lot easier. It was like, okay, well, let's get a divorce. Okay, well, let's figure it out, right? Okay, see you, bye. Before, you had to like go to a priest and tell him a bunch of shit, and the legal fees for divorces, I think, were very expensive. They made it like low cost divorce, drive-through divorce. Not great, by the way. And that's Neptune and Libra. Remember, Libra's law too. So it's like dissolving the scales of justice and the agreements. To me, the relation between Gen X and the baby boomers is really interesting. Very, very interesting. All right, so let's move on to Gen X. Actually, we're going to move on to the millennials. Now, Gen X will have the Pluto and Sag kids. Oh, I left them out of there. Left Gen Z out of there. How could I do that? Okay, so generation Gen Z. I thought I had them in there. Gen Z. Let's put them in there right now. My bad, Gen Z. You know, I had them. Oh, I do have them in there. Where the hell did they go? Hold on. They're supposed to be after the millennials. Is that it? Oh, man. Let's put them in there. My apologies. All right. So we got Gen Z. All right. And then they have Neptune. We're going to say Neptune and Aquarius. Because it is. And we're going to call it 1997. Thanks for being patient. I thought I had this. And I'm going to do a more blown out thing around this with, because there's a lot of movie representations as well. Yeah, I did this once a while ago. And let's see. And for me, what movie did I grow up with? Pluto and Virgo was Mary Poppins. That was the movie we grew. And what was Mary Poppins? She was a fucking housemaid, right? And what was Dick Van Dyke? He was a chimney sweep. But it's very Virgo-esque, isn't it? Those are Virgo gigs. But she was a witch, and he might have been a warlock. And that's very Neptune and Scorpio. That was our movie. So for the but for Gen X, their relationship movie when they were young was Star Wars. Star Wars. It was a relationship between Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker. Okay. Culture Wars. All right. We got that. Get that bug. Go get it. Just don't look at it. Get it. Oh, it's a scorpion. Oh, hold on. What is that? It's a spider of some sort. Okay, you get off. You're lucky. Just move. Just go. All right. We got fucking wild nature here tonight. Got the demon cat outside. We got a scorpion. I took the scorpion out. And then we have unidentified spider. It's wild nature here. Okay. Let's see. Culture Wars. Then we got Pluto, Neptune, Aquarius. We got Pluto and Aquarius. Aquarius. 2004. All right. So I fixed this. Well, that was interesting, huh, Jasper? He was going over there to deal with that scorpion. That would not have been a good thing for you. Leave it alone. I did your work for you. All right. Let's get back to the bullet points. So I hope you're enjoying this. We're almost done here. Okay. So here we go. Millennials, they show up in 1984. Neptune goes into Capricorn. That's what they have, Neptune and Capricorn. Social complexes and inversion take hold. Now, they don't have a war, but we see 9/11. Like they lived through 9/11, and then they lived through these weird proxy wars, right? And Pluto moves into Capricorn in 2009. So they wind up having, some of them don't have children, right? There's a lot of millennials that just don't have children for whatever reason. They're not into it. And the ones that do have children wind up having them generally a little bit later because they need to pay off their student loan or whatever, right? Not all of them, but fair amount do. And these would be the kids that would come out of, like if I was supposed to have kids on time, during the 80s and even into the 90s, mid 80s into the 90s, I would have had a millennial kid. So we have Neptune and Scorpio. The Pluto and Virgo people have Neptune and Scorpio. And, of course, we're dealing with things like, drugs and intensity and eroticism and, telepathy and, psychic phenomena. So our children would be the consummation of that with Pluto and Scorpio. And they're the first generation that is truly transpersonal. You go all the way back to even, it's dead. Why don't you just leave it alone? Leave it. It might be poisonous still. He's stalking the now dead scorpion, smelling it. You gonna paw it? You're pawing it now, aren't you? Yeah, he's dead. I did your job for you. And move on. There you go. Anyway, just think if somebody's watching this for the first time. Like, what the fuck is this guy doing? So the millennials have this Pluto and Scorpio thing that they're working, and they're dark. The millennials are dark. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. They're intense, right? Like Benito would have, Benito Diaz, theoretically, he could have been my kid. Think about that. Maybe okay, Benito was my kid, actually. But that's the generation that comes out of this Neptune and Scorpio. They're intense. And they're working this thing out, but they're working it out in the flesh. Like we're working it out in this whole kind of Neptunian realm, right? We're working it out with drugs and sensory perception. They're embodying it. This is what happens with Pluto, right? They're embodying it. Like I know my parents with Neptune, they probably would have liked to have had a job that they enjoyed, that they just didn't have to go to work to provide for the family. So I had to embody that thing and then live it out. And this is what happens here. I think this shit is so interesting. Now, the millennials are having kids, right? They're having kids. So Generation A comes in 2009. So these babies that are starting to be born in 2009, 2010. Now, some of them obviously are going to be born by some Gen Xers are going to have some of those kids too. They're, a little bit later. So it's not like this thing is just cut and dry. It's like, okay, stop. You can't have a kid. I mean, clearly I'm a symbol of that, right? Yep. Pluto and Sag. Yes, Pluto and Sag. Oh, thank you. But Pluto and Sag. But Pluto in Aquarius will be worked out. Joan, she's all over it. Pluto and Sag, 2004. Yes. Pluto and Sag is actually 1996. Here we go. 2024, Pluto will be in Aquarius. So now the millennials start to have these Generation A kids. Not all of them. The first batch, first wave, 2009, 10, 11, 12. I think those are Gen X moms having their kids a little bit later, right? That's, and we're, so Gen X will go all the way up to what, 83, 84. So we're out into like 25, 26, 27, right around the right age to have those kids. But once we get into like 2015, 2016, 2017, those moms are starting to age out a little bit. And now we're having the millennials start to have kids. And so they're the ones, for the most part, that are giving birth to these Generation A kids. And what do they have? They have Neptune and Capricorn. What does Generation A have? Pluto and Capricorn. And so when we look at the millennials, what are they trying to do? The millennials are dissatisfied with culture at large. They don't like, it's like they're not into, this idea of the patriarchy, or not all millennials, but, we can see where the culture of complaint and the culture of social activism really starts to come on during the rise of the millennials. They want to burn it down. That's Pluto and Scorpio. They want to burn it to the ground. And so they have this nagging sense that the institutions, the Capricornian institutions, are untrustworthy. And for the most part, I think they're right with Neptune and Capricorn, but they also have Uranus and Capricorn. And so they have a radical relationship with it. And then you get into community organizing and all that shit. So ultimately, they're going to have these kids, if they just left them alone and didn't try to turn them into a girl if they're a boy, or a boy if they're a girl, and then traumatize them with all these masks. These Pluto and Capricorn kids will lay the tracks for the new world. Like they will be the creators, the physical manifestors of the new world. After this bullshit that we're going through, the Gen Z will be they'll be the philosophers. Jasper's running around here like he caught the damn scorpion. You didn't catch the scorpion. I did that. He's running around like he was a victory dance or something. I did that. You didn't do that. So do you see how this works? To me, this is really fascinating. Because when we get into Neptune, we get into the hope, the dream, the sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrifice with Neptune as well. Like my parents, Neptune and Virgo, they sacrificed. They sacrificed their sense of purpose to have a job, make money, raise a family. You go back to the people that had Neptune and Leo. What did they sacrifice? They sacrificed a lot. They sacrificed, the life that they had, and they went off to a fucking war. They lived through the Depression. They got through that, and then they had to go through a fucking war. And then there's always this idea of sacrifice that's connected to Neptune. And I think in a lot of ways, even with Neptune and Libra, the boomers are sacrificing their marriages in a lot of ways. This whole idea of this sacred trust between a man and a woman, and it's inviolate. You just don't get divorced. That just goes out the window with the boomers. So it's really interesting. And Pluto's the transformational component, I think, to the delusion, the hope, the dream, and the sacrifice. It gets worked out with Pluto, and it gets very real with Pluto. And you can see how this thing works. To me, it's really fascinating. So the Gen Z kids are going to start to have their kids now. So some of them who are in their 20s are having kids now. And they were born in 1996. So they'd be, let's say 97, just for shits and giggles, right? So 2017, they're 20. So 25. The oldest Gen Zers are 25, I think. Right? Am I right about that? I think I am. 97, 2000. Yeah. 25. Yeah, I think so. So But they will start I think the bulk of them as we move through, right, 2005, 2006, all the way up to the 2007, 2008, the bulk of them will have their kids when Pluto is in Aquarius. So they'll get to deal with their, now my kid has Neptune, Aquarius, Uranus, and Pisces. Yeah. So anyway, just an interesting lineage astrologically and how all this stuff gets worked out. Fascinating. With Neptune and Pluto. Neptune, the hope, the delusion, the sacrifice, the dream. Pluto, the death, right? The death, the transformation, the intensity, hopefully the rebirth of that thing. So we're all connected in that way. We're all connected through this relationship with these generations. Oh, here's the tough guy. You did not kill that scorpion. You're running around like you did it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Isn't there a movie about a guy who takes credit for saving somebody and gets all this accolades and money, and he didn't do it, but somebody else? Is there a movie like, isn't Nicolas Cage in that or something? You're that guy. You're taking credit for something you didn't do. You notice I was talking about the millennials and that scorpion came up. Yeah, I know. All right, let's get out of here. Oh, before I go, don't forget, I have a webinar coming up this Saturday. If you want to learn about more cool shit, I'm going to leave the link inside of the description, and it's on the Sabian symbols. I've been wanting to do this webinar for a very long time, and guess what? Now I'm getting to do it. Randy Rhoads. I'm going to talk about Randy Rhoads' death tomorrow on my show. Man, that Randy Rhoads' death is weird. A weird death. Anyway, I'm doing a webinar on the Sabian symbols. Here, go to my Twitter page. You'll be able to see it there. By the way, everybody who's helped out Leon, thank you so much. It's amazing what's happening. You know, you guys always step up. I think Leon is at like $4,000 right now. $4,000. You guys rock. So here we go. This is webinar, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's this Saturday. Decoding the Sabian symbols. It's right there. We're going to get into it. What they are, how they work. There is a key to the Sabian symbols, and everybody will be able to ultimately fill out like a. It won't be a chart, but it will be a page where they'll be able to essentially put enough information in so that you can have your Sabian symbol for your sun, for your moon, for the ascendant, for the midheaven, Venus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be really good. And it's going to be a 2.5 hour webinar. And it's at the very affordable price of $29. Right there, $29. We'll talk about the inner degrees a little bit, Elias Lonsdale, a few other degree systems. We'll get into Elsie Wheeler. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive too on Mark Edmund Jones, who's a really interesting character, by the way. All right, that's it. Been going here for almost 3 hours. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to my Pluto and Virgo. It's always a pleasure to serve you. All right. We're out of here. See me tomorrow. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. We'll see you tomorrow over on the 15 Minutes of Flame side. Got a lot to talk about. Jasper, do you have anything else you want to say to anybody else here tonight? Huh? Anything else you want to say? Do you have any final words for your fan club? You scorpion killer. He's no scorpion killer. All right, take care. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to stay up what's possible. Thank you. I love you all. You're the absolute best. And we'll catch you tomorrow morning. Bye for now.